The rain had started as a whisper against the windshield, then crescendoed into a relentless drumming that forced Celestine Morrow to pull off the highway an hour outside of Ashmont. She'd been driving for 6 hours straight from the medical conference in Silverpine, her mind still buzzing with lectures on innovative surgical techniques and the weight of the award she'd received, top emerging cardiac surgeon of the Northeast. The trophy sat in its velvet-lined box on the passenger seat, catching glints of passing headlights. She'd wanted to surprise Donovan. Their 10th anniversary was 3 weeks away, but she thought coming home a day early with this achievement would be celebration enough. She'd even stopped at that little bakery he loved in Millbrook to pick up his favorite lemon lavender cake, the one they'd served at their wedding reception all those years ago. The storm eventually broke into a steady drizzle, and Celestine merged back onto the highway, her Toyota humming steadily beneath her. She thought about Donovan's face when she'd tell him about the award. He'd always been her biggest supporter, even when her residency meant 80-hour weeks and missed dinners. Even when her fellowship took her away for months at a time. "You're saving lives, Celly," he'd say, using the nickname only he was allowed to use. "That's bigger than both of us." She smiled to herself, remembering their last video call 2 nights ago. He'd been in his study, the warm lamplight casting shadows across his angular features, his dark hair slightly disheveled in that way that made her heart skip even after 10 years. He'd been working on the manuscript for his 3rd novel, a thriller this time, departing from his usual literary fiction. "Missing you," he'd said, his hazel eyes sincere through the screen. "Come home safe." It was nearly 8 o'clock when Celestine turned onto Meridian Lane, the tree-lined street where they'd bought their Victorian-style home 5 years ago. The house had been a fixer-upper, but they'd poured love and savings into it, transforming it into something from a magazine spread. Donovan had insisted on the name, Meridian House, because he said it was where their 2 lives intersected perfectly. She noticed his car in the driveway, along with another vehicle she didn't recognize, a sleek silver sedan with dealer plates still in the window. Probably a rental, she thought. Maybe his editor Jasper had come by to discuss the manuscript. Or his agent. She parked on the street to leave room, grabbing her overnight bag, the cake box, and her trophy case. The front door was unlocked, which wasn't unusual when Donovan was home. The foyer was dimly lit, just the small lamp on the console table casting a warm glow across the hardwood floors they'd refinished themselves. She could hear music playing softly from upstairs. Was that jazz? Donovan rarely listened to jazz. "Don," she called out, setting her bags down quietly, suddenly wanting to maximize the surprise. "Donovan?" No answer. The music continued, a saxophone weaving through a melody she didn't recognize. Celestine slipped off her shoes, the cool floor welcome against her feet after hours in driving loafers. She picked up the cake box and began climbing the stairs, each step familiar, the 3rd one from the bottom creaking in that way she'd been meaning to fix. Their bedroom was at the end of the hall, the door slightly ajar, light spilling out into the corridor. She was smiling as she pushed the door open. The words, "Surprise, I'm," dying on her lips. The scene before her seemed to unfold in slow motion, each detail searing itself into her memory with excruciating clarity. The bedroom, their bedroom, with the pewter gray walls she'd painted, the cream duvet they'd bought in Barcelona. The photographs of their life together arranged on the dresser had been transformed into something unrecognizable. Donovan was there, on their bed, his shirt unbuttoned, his expression frozen in shock. And there was a woman, young, maybe 25, with copper-colored hair spread across Celestine's pillow, wearing nothing but a black lace camisole that had been pushed up. The woman's lipstick, a dark crimson, was smeared across Donovan's collar. The cake box slipped from Celestine's hands, hitting the floor with a muffled thud. The sound seemed to break whatever spell had held the 3 of them frozen. "Celly!" Donovan lunged off the bed, his voice strangled. "Celly, wait!" But Celestine couldn't move. Her body had turned to stone, rooted to the spot just inside the doorway. Her mind cataloged everything with the clinical precision she'd learned in medical school. The wine glasses on the nightstand, both half empty. The woman's dress pooled on the floor beside Celestine's vintage reading chair. A man's tie, Donovan's burgundy silk tie, the one she'd given him for his last birthday, draped over the bedpost. Candles, he'd lit candles. Who? Celestine's voice came out as barely a whisper. She cleared her throat, tried again. Who is this? The woman had pulled a sheet around herself, her face flushed crimson. She looked terrified, her blue eyes wide, mascara slightly smudged. She opened her mouth, closed it again. This is... Donovan was buttoning his shirt with shaking hands. Sally, please, let me explain. Who is she? The words erupted from Celestine's chest, loud enough that she surprised herself. Years of maintaining professional composure in operating rooms shattered in an instant. Seraphine, the woman said quietly, pulling the sheet tighter. My name is Seraphine Thorne, Seraphine. Even her name sounded like something from one of Donovan's novels. Beautiful, lyrical, young. How long? Celestine asked, her voice now eerily calm. She was slipping into that mode she used during surgery, when emotion became a liability and clinical detachment was survival. Donovan had his pants on now, was moving toward her. Celly, baby, please, don't. She held up one hand, stopping him mid-stride. Don't call me that. How long? She watched his face crumble, watched him age a decade in seconds. 6 months, he whispered. 6 months. Half a year. While Celestine had been performing life-saving surgeries, presenting at conferences, building the career they'd always talked about, Donovan had been bringing this girl, this Seraphine, into their home. Into their bed. Did you love her? The question escaped before Celestine could stop it, and she hated how small her voice sounded. Donovan's silence was answer enough. Celestine didn't remember leaving the bedroom. One moment she was standing in the doorway, the next she was in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the marble countertop they'd chosen together at that warehouse sale. Her trophy case sat abandoned in the foyer. The celebration she'd imagined, champagne, laughter, Donovan spinning her around the kitchen, felt like something from another lifetime. She could hear footsteps on the stairs, voices, Donovan's deep timbre and Seraphine's higher pitch and urgent conversation. Then the front door opened and closed. An engine started. The silver sedan pulled away. Celestine stared at the coffee maker, remembering the morning she'd left for the conference. Donovan had made her favorite cinnamon coffee, had packed her travel mug with extra care. I'll miss you every second, he'd said, kissing her forehead. Had he been planning this? Had he been counting down the hours until she left so he could invite Seraphine over? The kitchen door swung open. Donovan stood there, fully dressed now, his face pale. He'd aged since their video call 2 nights ago, or maybe Celestine was just seeing him clearly for the first time. She's gone, he said unnecessarily. Celestine laughed, the sound harsh and foreign. How thoughtful. You got your mistress out of our house before we had to have an awkward conversation. Don't call her that. What should I call her? Celestine spun around, her hands curling into fists. Your girlfriend? Your lover? What's the appropriate term for the woman my husband has been fucking in our bed? Donovan flinched. Celly, stop calling me that. Her voice cracked. You lost the right to that name the first time you touched her. She watched him absorb the blow, saw the way his shoulders sagged. Good. She wanted him to hurt the way she was hurting. This searing, nauseating pain that felt like someone had reached into her chest and twisted. I didn't mean for this to happen, Donovan said quietly. Oh, well, that makes it better. You didn't mean to have an affair for 6 months. You just accidentally kept inviting her over. You accidentally kissed her. Accidentally took off her clothes. Accidentally, Celestine couldn't finish. Her stomach roiled, and for a terrifying moment, she thought she might be sick right there on their kitchen floor. I met her at a book signing, Donovan said, as if Celestine had asked. She was in the front row. Afterward, she came up to get her book signed, and we just talked. About literature, about writing, about everything. She understood things about my work that I don't? Celestine's voice was ice. Is that what you were going to say? You're always gone, Donovan said, and there was something new in his voice now. Defensiveness, maybe even anger. You're always at the hospital, always at conferences. When was the last time we had a real conversation, Sally? When was the last time you asked me about my writing? Are you seriously blaming me for your affair right now? Celestine couldn't believe what she was hearing. I've been working to build a career to save lives. I know. I know that. And I'm proud of you, I am. But what about us? What about our marriage? You're so focused on being Dr. Celestine Morrow, cardiac surgeon, that you forgot about being Sally, my wife. The words hit like a physical blow. Celestine gripped the counter harder, her knuckles white. I was doing this for us, she said quietly. Every extra shift, every conference, every promotion, I thought I was building something for our future. For the family we talked about having. We never talked about anything. Donovan's voice rose. You decided? You decided to take the fellowship across the country. You decided to accept this position that requires 80-hour weeks. You decided, and I just went along with it because that's what I always do. So you decided to sleep with someone else. Very mature, Donovan. Very evolved. I was lonely. The words burst out of him. I was lonely in our own house, in our own marriage. Do you know what it's like to eat dinner alone every night? To go to bed alone? To wake up alone? You're physically here maybe 3 nights a week, and even when you are, you're not really here. Your mind is always at the hospital. Celestine wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him understand the unfairness of what he was saying. But underneath the rage, a small, insidious voice whispered, Is he right? She thought about the past year. The extra shifts she'd taken to prove herself for the department head position. The conferences she'd attended to network, to build her reputation. The nights she'd stayed late to review surgical procedures, to study, to research. And yes, when she came home, she was exhausted. She'd eat whatever Donovan had made, sometimes fall asleep on the couch while he watched TV beside her. But that was what marriage was, wasn't it? Partnership. Supporting each other through the demanding phases. She'd supported him through his writer's block, through his second novel's poor sales, through his crisis of confidence. Why couldn't he do the same? So your solution was to find someone younger, someone who had time to sit around and discuss literary theory? Celestine heard the bitterness in her own voice. Someone who doesn't have to work 80-hour weeks because she probably doesn't have a career? Seraphine is a PhD candidate at Ashmont University, Donovan said quietly. She's writing her dissertation on contemporary American fiction. She's brilliant, Seraphine. He said her name with such tenderness that Celestine felt something inside her crack completely. Do you love her? She asked again, needing to hear him say it. Donovan's silence stretched between them like a chasm. Do you love her? Celestine repeated, her voice breaking. I don't know, he finally said. Maybe, yes, I think I do. The world tilted. Celestine grabbed the counter to keep from falling. She'd prepared herself for lust, for a midlife crisis, for a meaningless affair. But love? He loved her? Get out, she whispered. Sally, get out! She looked up, met his eyes. Get out of this house right now, or I swear to God, Donovan, I will not be responsible for what I do next. She watched the fear flicker across his face. She'd never threatened him before. Never even raised her voice in anger during their entire relationship. They'd always been the couple that talked things through, that communicated, that worked together. But that couple was dead now, killed the moment Donovan touched Seraphine Thorne. Where am I supposed to go? Donovan asked. I don't care. Go to a hotel. Go to your parents. Go to her. Just get out of my sight. He stood there for another moment, and Celestine could see him wanting to say something more. Then he turned and walked out. She heard him climbing the stairs, heard drawers opening and closing, the sound of the suitcase being pulled from the closet. 20 minutes later, he came back down. I'll stay at the Ashmont Inn, he said from the kitchen doorway. We should talk about this when you've calmed down. With clear heads, maybe see a marriage counselor. There's nothing to talk about, Celestine said, still not turning to look at him. You made your choice. It doesn't have to mean the end of us. People work through affairs. We could You said you love her. Now she did turn, and she saw him flinch at whatever he saw in her face. You didn't just sleep with her, Donovan. You fell in love with her. In our house. In our bed. While I was out there trying to build a life for us. So, no. I don't think there's anything to work through. She watched him absorb this. Saw the moment he realized she meant it. His face went pale. I'm sorry, he whispered. Celly, I'm so sorry. So am I. He left. She heard the front door close, heard his car start and pull away. And then Celestine was alone in Meridian House, the home they'd named for the place where their lives intersected perfectly. She stood in the kitchen for a long time, listening to the silence. The refrigerator hummed. The old grandfather clock in the living room ticked. Outside, wind rustled through the maple trees they'd planted their first spring here. Finally, she moved. She climbed the stairs slowly, each step an effort. She pushed open the bedroom door and stood in the doorway again, forcing herself to really look. The wine glasses, the candles still burning, the rumpled sheets, her pillow with the indent from Seraphine's copper hair. Celestine walked to the bed and stripped it methodically, pulling off the duvet, the sheets, the pillowcases. She carried everything downstairs and stuffed it into the washing machine, adding 3 times the normal amount of detergent. Then she went back upstairs and blew out the candles one by one. She picked up Seraphine's wine glass and carried it to the bathroom, where she dropped it into the toilet and flushed. It didn't go down, so she fished it out and threw it in the trash instead. Donovan's glass followed. In the bedroom, she opened all the windows despite the cool October air. She needed the room to breathe, to be purged of whatever had happened here tonight. It was only then, standing in the middle of their violated bedroom, that Celestine finally let herself cry. The sun rose on a woman who didn't recognize herself. Celestine stood in front of the bathroom mirror, studying the stranger looking back. Her auburn hair hung limp around her face. Her green eyes, usually bright with determination, were red-rimmed and hollow. She'd aged overnight, or maybe she'd always looked this tired and just never noticed. She'd called in sick to work, the first time in her 8 years at Ashmont Memorial Hospital. Her chief resident, Marcellus, had been concerned. Dr. Morrow, are you all right? You never get sick. I am now, she'd said, and hung up. The house felt different in daylight. Wrong. Every room held memories that had been recontextualized by last night's revelation. The kitchen, where they'd cooked together on her rare nights off. The living room, where they'd cuddled on the couch, where he'd read her passages from his manuscripts. The study, where she'd found him late at night, and he'd always look up with that smile, that I'm glad you're home expression. Had any of it been real? Or had she been living in a fantasy while Donovan lived in reality? A reality that included Seraphine Thorne. Her phone rang. Donovan. She let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Voicemail. 3 more times before he apparently gave up. An hour later, a text. Please talk to me. We need to discuss this like adults. Like adults? As if he hadn't destroyed their marriage like a petulant child who'd grown bored with his toys. Celestine walked through the house in a daze, trying to identify what felt different. Then she realized she was seeing everything for the first time as hers alone, not theirs. That painting above the mantel, they'd bought it together at a street fair in Portland, had laughed at the artist's pretentious explanation of his technique. The bookshelf in the study, filled with both her medical textbooks and his collection of first editions, their intellectual lives intertwined on those shelves. The garden visible through the back windows. She'd planted the roses. He'd built the trellis. Together, they'd created something beautiful. How do you divide a life? Her phone rang again. This time, a different name. Lyric Castellanos, her best friend since medical school. I'm coming over, Lyric said without preamble. Don't argue. I'm already in my car. How did you— Marcellus called me. Said you sounded weird. What happened? Celestine opened her mouth to say she was fine, but what came out was a sound she didn't recognize. Something between a sob and a gasp. I'm 10 minutes away, Lyric said, her voice fierce with protectiveness. "Hold on, Celly." Lyric took one look at Celestine and pulled her into a hug so tight it hurt. They stood in the foyer for a long time, Celestine shaking but not crying. She'd run out of tears somewhere around 4 in the morning. "Tell me," Lyric said when they finally separated. So Celestine did. She told her everything, from the surprise early return to the trophy left forgotten in the foyer, from the bedroom scene to Donovan's declaration of love for someone else. Lyric listened without interrupting, her expressive dark eyes growing harder with each detail. "I'll kill him," she said when Celestine finished. "I'll legitimately kill him and claim temporary insanity. No jury would convict me." Despite everything, Celestine felt her mouth twitch. "That's not helpful." "It would be very helpful. To me, emotionally." Lyric was pacing now, her hands gesturing emphatically. 6 months? He's been doing this for 6 months? And he had the audacity to bring her here, to your house, to your bed. Lyric. And then he tried to blame you for it? Because you were busy being a literal heart surgeon? Because you were busy saving actual lives instead of sitting around discussing symbolism in his mediocre novels? "His novels aren't mediocre," Celestine said automatically, then stopped herself. Why was she defending him? Lyric noticed. "Stop that. Stop making excuses for him. He doesn't deserve your defense." She was right. Celestine knew she was right. But 10 years of being Donovan's champion didn't disappear overnight. "What do I do?" Celestine asked, sinking onto the couch. "I don't know what to do." Lyric sat beside her, taking her hand. "First, you get a lawyer. A really good one. Savage. Someone who will make him regret he was ever born. Second, you document everything. Dates, times, any evidence of the affair. Third, you take care of yourself. Because you've been taking care of everyone else for so long that you've forgotten how." "I should have seen this coming," Celestine said quietly. "I should have noticed—" "No." Lyric's voice was sharp. "Absolutely not. You are not taking responsibility for his betrayal. He made a choice. He could have talked to you about feeling neglected. He could have suggested counseling. He could have done literally anything except start fucking a graduate student in your marital bed." Celestine flinched at the language, but Lyric was right. She couldn't let Donovan's manipulation make her doubt herself. "You know what the worst part is?" Celestine said. "He's not completely wrong. I have been absent. I've been so focused on my career that I haven't been present in our marriage. Maybe if I'd—" "Stop. Right there." Lyric gripped both of Celestine's shoulders, forcing her to make eye contact. "Marriage is a partnership. If he felt neglected, he should have communicated that before sticking his dick in someone else. Your dedication to your career doesn't justify his affair. Nothing justifies his affair. Do you understand me?" Celestine nodded, but she wasn't sure she believed it. "Not yet." They sat in silence for a while, Lyric just being present, solid, real. Finally, Celestine said, "I won an award. Top Emerging Cardiac Surgeon of the Northeast. That's why I came home early. To surprise him." Lyric made a sound of pure rage. "He doesn't get to ruin this for you. You worked your ass off for that award. You've dedicated your life to saving people, to being excellent at what you do. Don't let his shitty choices diminish your achievement." But the award, still sitting in its velvet-lined box in the foyer, felt meaningless now. Celestine had spent her life building toward professional success, had sacrificed so much for it. And for what? To come home to this? A week passed in a blur. Celestine moved through the house like a ghost, sleeping in the guest room because she couldn't bring herself to enter the master bedroom. She'd gone back to work after 2 days. Staying home was worse. Every corner of the house a reminder. At least in the OR she had purpose. At least there, she was in control. She hired the lawyer Lyric recommended, Octavia Winters, a woman with silver hair and eyes like steel. "I'll destroy him," Octavia promised in their first meeting. "By the time I'm done, he'll wish he'd never heard the word adultery." Donovan had been calling daily, texting. He'd even shown up at the house twice. But Celestine had seen his car from the window and simply didn't answer the door. She wasn't ready. She didn't know if she'd ever be ready. Then, On day 8, she came home from an exhausting 15-hour shift to find an envelope taped to the front door. Her name written in Donovan's distinctive scrawl. She should have thrown it away. Should have torn it up without reading. But she found herself standing in the kitchen, the envelope in her hands, her resolve crumbling. Inside was a letter, handwritten on the expensive stationery she'd given him last Christmas. Dearest Celly, I know you don't want to hear from me. I know I've forfeited the right to your time, your attention, your love. But I need you to understand something, even if understanding doesn't lead to forgiveness. I never meant to hurt you. I know how inadequate that sounds, how hollow, but it's true. You are the most extraordinary person I've ever known. Your dedication, your brilliance, your capacity to save lives, it's humbling. It always has been, but somewhere along the way, I stopped being your partner and became your cheerleader. Your support staff. The person who kept the house running while you did the important work. And I told myself that was enough, that your success was our success, that I didn't need my own identity beyond being your husband. Meeting Seraphine woke something up in me. She saw me, not as Dr. Morrow's husband, not as the guy who used to write decent novels, but as Donovan. Just Donovan. She asked me about my dreams, my fears, the book I've been too scared to write. She made me feel like I mattered in my own right. I'm not justifying what I did. There's no justification for betrayal. But I need you to understand that this wasn't about you failing me. This was about me failing myself. I let my identity become subsumed by yours, and instead of talking to you about it, instead of working through it, I found an escape. I love Seraphine. I won't lie about that, but I also love you. I've loved you since the day we met in that terrible coffee shop near campus, when you were cramming for your anatomy final and I was procrastinating on my thesis. I loved you when we got married in your parents' garden. I loved you every day of these 10 years, even the days I felt invisible in our life together. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect you to take me back. But I need you to know that what happened isn't a reflection of your worth. You are enough, Celly. You have always been enough. More than enough. The failure here is mine alone. Donovan Celestine read the letter 3 times, each pass revealing new layers of pain and truth. Then she did something she'd been avoiding. She went upstairs to their bedroom. She'd had the sheets cleaned professionally, had bought new pillows, but she still hadn't been able to sleep in here. Now she forced herself to sit on the edge of the bed and really think about Donovan's words. Had she made him invisible? She replayed their life together, trying to see it from his perspective. The dinner parties where she dominated conversations with talk of work. The book readings she'd missed because of surgeries. The manuscript pages he'd asked her to review that she'd promised to read tomorrow. A tomorrow that never came. She'd thought she was being a good wife by being successful, by bringing home awards and accolades, by making enough money that Donovan could focus on his writing without worrying about finances. But maybe that wasn't what he needed. Maybe he needed her to just be there, to ask him about his day, to care about the things that mattered to him. But did that justify an affair? Celestine stood and walked to Donovan's closet. His clothes still hung there. He'd only taken enough for a few days. She ran her hand along his shirts, remembering the first time she'd worn one after a shower at his apartment, how he'd said she looked better in it than he did. They'd been so happy once. Or had they? Had she just been too busy to notice the cracks forming? Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Dr. Morrow, this is Seraphine Thorne. Please, can we talk? I need to explain. Celestine stared at the message. The rational part of her, the surgeon's brain, said to ignore it. To let Octavia handle everything. But another part, the part that needed to understand, needed to see the woman who'd stolen her husband, made her fingers move. Tomorrow. The coffee shop on Hartley Street. 2 p.m. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Seraphine Thorne was more beautiful in daylight, which Celestine somehow resented. She sat in the corner of the coffee shop, her copper hair pulled back in a braid, wearing jeans and an oversized sweater that made her look even younger. When she saw Celestine enter, she stood halfway, then sat back down, uncertain. Celestine ordered a black coffee. She needed the bitterness, and sat across from Seraphine. Up close, she could see the woman wasn't as young as she'd first appeared. Late 20s, maybe 30. Old enough to know better. Young enough for people to call it a mistake. "Thank you for meeting me," Seraphine said quietly. "I didn't think you would." "I almost didn't." Celestine wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, needing something to hold. "Why did you text me?" "Because I need you to understand that I'm not a homewrecker. I'm not some evil seductress who targeted a married man." Seraphine's voice was soft but steady. "I know that's what I look like in this story, but it's more complicated than that." "It's really not." Celestine kept her voice level, clinical. "You slept with my husband." "In my house. In my bed." "There's nothing complicated about that." Seraphine flinched. "You're right. But please let me explain how it started." "Not to excuse it, but so you understand." Celestine wanted to leave. Wanted to throw her coffee in this woman's face. But she'd come this far. "Fine, explain." "I met Donovan at his reading 8 months ago. I'm writing my dissertation on contemporary narrative structures, and his second novel is one of my case studies. I went to the event as a fan, nothing more." Seraphine twisted her hands together. "We talked afterward about his use of temporal displacement, and he invited me to coffee to continue the discussion." "How romantic," Celestine said dryly. "It was just academic at first." "I swear it was. We'd meet every week or two to discuss books, writing theory, his work in progress. He never mentioned being unhappy in his marriage. He barely mentioned you at all, actually, which I thought was strange but didn't question." "When did it change?" Seraphine looked down at her untouched latte. "About 6 months ago. We were at his house, your house, because he wanted to show me his first edition collection. You were at a conference, I think. We'd been drinking wine, talking about his new novel. And he kissed me." Celestine felt sick. "And you kissed him back?" "Yes." Seraphine met her eyes. "I'm not going to lie about that. But I need you to know that I asked him afterward about you, about his marriage. He told me you were separated, that you'd been growing apart for years and were staying together out of habit more than love. He said you were essentially roommates who happened to be married." The words hit Celestine like a physical blow. "He told you we were separated?" "Yes. He said you'd agreed to figure out the logistics of divorce after your fellowship ended. That it was amicable and mutual." Seraphine's voice cracked. "I didn't know. I swear to God, Dr. Morrow, I didn't know you were still together." "Not really together." Celestine sat back, her mind reeling. Donovan had lied. Not just to her, but to Seraphine, too. He'd created an entire fiction, crafting narratives for both of them that allowed him to have everything he wanted. "When did you find out the truth?" Celestine asked, that night. "When you came home?" Seraphine wiped at her eyes. "The look on your face, I knew immediately that he'd lied to me. You had no idea about me, and he clearly had no idea you were coming home. The whole thing was a lie." They sat in silence for a moment, two women who'd both been betrayed by the same man in different ways. "I ended it," Seraphine said quietly. "That night, I told him I never wanted to see him again. He's tried calling, texting, showing up at my apartment. I've blocked him everywhere." "Good for you," Celestine said, and she meant it. At least one of them had the sense to walk away. "I'm so sorry," Seraphine whispered. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. If I'd known, but you didn't know, because he lied to both of us." Celestine felt something shift inside her. All this time, she'd been consumed with questions about what she'd done wrong, how she'd failed. But this wasn't about her failures. This was about Donovan's choices, his lies, his betrayal, not just of their marriage vows, but of basic honesty and decency. "For what it's worth," Seraphine said, "he talked about you all the time. About how brilliant you are, how dedicated. He was proud of you, even if he couldn't figure out where he fit in your life anymore." "That's not worth much," Celestine said. But she filed the information away, another piece of the puzzle that was her shattered marriage. They talked for another hour. Seraphine told her about the lies Donovan had spun, a separate apartment he supposedly kept, the legal separation papers he claimed to have filed, the amicable coexistence he'd described. He'd been meticulous in his fiction, crafting a story believable enough that a smart, educated woman had fallen for it completely. When they finally parted ways, Celestine felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness for Seraphine exactly, but an understanding. They'd both been characters in Donovan's story, pawns moved around on a board they hadn't known existed. As Celestine walked to her car, her phone rang. Donovan again. This time she answered, "Celly, thank God." "Did you tell Seraphine we were separated?" Her voice was ice. The silence on the other end told her everything. "Celly, I can explain. Did you tell her we'd agreed to divorce? That we were basically roommates?" He exhaled shakily. "Yes, but I felt like we were... Emotionally, we were separated, even if legally. So you lied to her. Just like you lied to me." Celestine felt a strange calm settle over her. "You created this entire fiction so you could have both of us. Your accomplished wife at home to make you look good, and your young mistress on the side to make you feel relevant. It wasn't like that. What was it like then?" "Explain it to me, Donovan. Explain how lying to two women for 6 months was somehow noble or justified. I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. I loved you both, and I couldn't..." "You didn't love either of us," Celestine said, the realization crystallizing as she spoke. "You loved what we represented. I was your successful wife, proof that you'd made it, married to a doctor, living in a beautiful house. And Seraphine was your escape, your validation that you were still interesting, still desirable, still the artist you'd always wanted to be. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Donovan." "That's the point." Celestine reached her car and leaned against it. "You want to know what's really sad? If you'd just talked to me, if you'd said, 'Celly, I'm feeling lost. I need more from our marriage,' we could have worked on it. We could have gone to counseling, adjusted our priorities, figured it out together. But you didn't trust our marriage enough to be honest. You didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth." She heard him crying on the other end of the line. Once that sound would have broken her heart. Now she felt nothing. "My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce proceedings," she said. "Don't contact me again. Celly, please." She hung up. The divorce took 4 months. Octavia was as ruthless as promised, and the fact that Donovan had committed adultery in their marital home made the proceedings swift. Celestine got the house, half of his book royalties, and her freedom. Donovan got his belongings, the Ashmont Inn's frequent guest points, and a reputation among their social circle as exactly what he was, a liar and a cheat. It was March when the papers were finally signed. Celestine stood in the lawyer's office, her signature making it official, and felt nothing. Not relief, not sadness, just a vast emptiness where her marriage used to be. "Congratulations," Octavia said, shaking her hand. "You're officially single." Celestine went home to Meridian House, her house now, and walked through the rooms. She'd spent the past 4 months slowly reclaiming the space. She'd repainted the bedroom a soft blue, bought a new bed, hung different artwork. The study was now entirely hers, her medical journals and research papers replacing Donovan's collection. She'd even renamed the house, couldn't stand the idea of keeping the name he'd given it. Now it was just 47 Meridian Lane. Lyric came over that evening with wine and takeout. They sat on the back porch, watching the spring sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. "How do you feel?" Lyric asked. Celestine considered the question. "Like I've survived something. Not thrived, not healed yet, but survived. That's a start. I keep thinking about all the time I wasted," Celestine admitted. 10 years with someone who I thought I knew, who I thought knew me, and it turns out we were strangers living in the same house. Or he was a coward who couldn't communicate like an adult. Lyric refilled their glasses. "Don't romanticize it, Celly. He made choices. Bad choices. This isn't about wasted time. It's about him wasting the gift of having you." Celestine smiled slightly. "You're very loyal. Damn right I am. You're brilliant, gorgeous, and you literally save lives for a living. Any man would be lucky to have you. Donovan just couldn't handle being with someone who shined brighter than him. Maybe that was true. Celestine had spent months wondering if her ambition had killed her marriage, if her dedication to surgery had been selfish. But she was starting to understand that her success hadn't destroyed their relationship. Donovan's inability to celebrate it had. I got offered the department head position, Celestine said quietly. Lyric nearly spit out her wine. What? When? Why didn't you tell me? Last week. I've been thinking about whether to take it. Are you insane? Of course you should take it. This is what you've been working toward. I know. But it means even longer hours, more responsibility. And I keep hearing Donovan's voice in my head, saying I prioritize work over relationships. Celly. Lyric set down her glass and took Celestine's hand. Listen to me carefully. Donovan was an insecure man who couldn't handle his wife's success. That's his failure, not yours. Don't you dare let his inadequacy hold you back from achieving everything you're capable of. But what if he was right? What if I am too focused on work? Then you find a partner who celebrates that instead of resenting it. You find someone who's secure enough in themselves that they don't need you to be smaller to make them feel bigger. Lyric squeezed her hand. Take the job. Be the department head. Save more lives. And if some man can't handle that, he's not the man for you. Celestine felt tears prick her eyes, the first she'd cried in weeks. When did you get so wise? I've always been this wise. You've just been too busy being in a shitty marriage to notice. Lyric grinned. So, are you taking the job? Celestine thought about it. About the operating rooms where she felt most herself. About the residents she could mentor, the programs she could implement, the lives she could save. About building a legacy that was entirely her own. Yes, she said. I'm taking the job. They clinked glasses as the sun disappeared below the horizon. 6 months later, Celestine stood in the newly renovated surgical wing of Ashmont Memorial Hospital, her name on a plaque by the door, Dr. Celestine Morrow, Department Head of Cardiac Surgery. The past half year had been a whirlwind of 14-hour days, policy implementations, and the steep learning curve of administration. But she loved it. She loved the challenge, the responsibility, the opportunity to shape not just individual lives but the entire direction of cardiac care at the hospital. She still lived in the house on Meridian Lane, though it looked nothing like the place she'd shared with Donovan. She'd made it entirely her own. Modern furniture, bold artwork, a home office that rivaled any professional space. The garden had been expanded, the kitchen renovated. It was her sanctuary now, not a mausoleum of a failed marriage. She dated occasionally, though nothing serious. A few dinners with Marcellus, her former chief resident, that fizzled into friendship. A brief thing with a visiting surgeon from Boston that ended amicably when he returned home. She wasn't looking for anything serious, wasn't sure she'd ever want to risk that vulnerability again. But she was happy. Genuinely, surprisingly happy. One Friday evening in early September, Celestine was leaving the hospital when she ran into someone unexpected. Seraphine Thorne, coming out of the hospital library. They stopped, both surprised, and for a moment, Celestine felt that familiar twist in her stomach. But then Seraphine smiled tentatively, and Celestine found herself smiling back. Dr. Morrow, Seraphine said. How are you? I'm well. You? Did you finish your dissertation? I did, actually. Defended it last month. I'm teaching now at Ashmont University. Congratulations. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then Seraphine said, I saw the article about you in the Ashmont Journal. The new surgical wing, your promotion. You should be proud. Thank you. Celestine hesitated, then said, I never thanked you for telling me the truth about the lies he told you. It helped, knowing that it wasn't about me being inadequate. Seraphine's expression softened. You were never inadequate. He was just too small to match your enormity. She paused. I learned something from that whole nightmare. I used to seek validation from external sources, men, mentors, anyone who could tell me I was worth something. But watching you pick up the pieces and build something even better, that taught me more about self-worth than any relationship ever could. Celestine felt something loosen in her chest. We both deserved better than him. We did. Seraphine smiled. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're thriving. You deserve every success. They parted ways, and Celestine realized something profound. She'd forgiven Seraphine. Not because what had happened was okay, but because holding on to that anger was giving Donovan power over her life that he no longer deserved. That night, Celestine did something she'd been putting off for months. She opened her laptop and searched Donovan's name. His third novel had been published 2 months ago to lukewarm reviews. Keen's attempt at thriller writing falls flat, read one review. He seems uncertain of his voice, lost between literary pretension and commercial accessibility. The book had sold poorly. She should have felt vindicated, should have felt satisfaction at his professional struggles. But instead, she felt a profound sadness for the man she'd once loved. The man who'd had everything and thrown it away because he couldn't figure out who he was beyond his wife's shadow. She closed the laptop and looked around her home office. Her medical degree hung on one wall, her various awards and certifications on another, photos of successful surgeries, of her team, of patients whose lives she'd saved. This was her legacy, built not on someone else's support but on her own dedication and skill. The house phone rang. She'd kept the landline because the hospital sometimes needed to reach her urgently. She answered to find an unfamiliar voice. Dr. Morrow, this is Raina Voss from Pacific Northwestern Medical Center. I'm calling about a position we'd like to discuss with you. We're building a new cardiac center, and your name came up repeatedly as our top choice to head the program. Seattle. The position would mean moving across the country, starting over in a new city, a new hospital. A year ago, even 6 months ago, Celestine would have immediately declined. She'd been too wounded, too tired, too broken to consider such a massive change. But now? Now she felt that familiar spark of excitement, the thrill of a new challenge. I'd be interested in hearing more, Celestine said. They talked for an hour about the position, the vision for the center, the resources available. It was everything Celestine had dreamed of. Complete autonomy, cutting-edge research opportunities, the chance to build a program from the ground up. When she hung up, she sat for a long time in the gathering darkness, thinking. This house, this hospital, this city, they'd all been part of her life with Donovan. She'd thought reclaiming them was healing, and it had been. But maybe true healing meant being willing to leave them behind, to start completely fresh somewhere that held no memories of betrayal. She called Lyric. I'm thinking about moving to Seattle, she said without preamble. Lyric was quiet for a moment. Then, tell me everything. Celestine explained the offer, the opportunity, the chance to build something entirely new. Are you running away? Lyric asked. Or running toward something? It was the right question. Celestine considered it carefully. I think, both, but mostly toward. I've proven I can survive here, that I can rebuild. But I don't want to just survive, Lyric. I want to thrive. And maybe that means leaving behind everything that reminds me of who I was and becoming who I'm meant to be. Then do it, Lyric said fiercely. Do it, and don't look back. You've earned the right to build a life entirely on your own terms. 2 years later, Dr. Celestine Morrow stood in the state-of-the-art operating room of the Pacific Northwestern Cardiac Center, leading a groundbreaking surgery. Her team moved around her with practiced precision, each person an extension of her will, her vision. The patient, a 53-year-old woman named Gloria with 3 children and 5 grandchildren, had been given a death sentence by every other surgeon. But Celestine had seen a way. 8 hours later, she emerged from the OR, exhausted but exhilarated. The surgery had been a success. Gloria would go home to her grandchildren. Outside, the Seattle skyline glittered in the evening light. Celestine had fallen in love with this city, its mountains and water, its coffee culture, its rain. She'd bought a modern townhouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound. She'd made new friends, joined a book club, taken up hiking. She'd built a life that was entirely, authentically hers. She still thought about Donovan sometimes, but the memories had lost their power to hurt. She'd heard through mutual friends that he'd moved to Portland, was working at a small publishing house, had given up on his own writing. She hoped he'd found peace, though she no longer particularly cared. As for Meridian House, she'd sold it before moving. A young couple with a new baby had bought it, had loved its bones and its history. Celestine hoped they'd fill it with better memories than the ones she'd left behind. Her phone buzzed. A text from Everett, the environmental lawyer she'd been dating for 6 months. Nothing serious yet, but promising. He was secure, kind, and genuinely excited about her work. When she talked about a complicated surgery, his eyes lit up with interest. When she had to cancel dinner for an emergency, he understood without resentment. "Dinner at my place when you're done?" "Made your favorite." She smiled and texted back, "Give me an hour." Celestine changed out of her scrubs and walked out of the hospital into the crisp Pacific Northwest evening. The air smelled of salt water and possibility. She thought about Gloria, about the second chance she'd just given her, about all the second chances people got, if they were brave enough to take them. She'd spent so long thinking her marriage had defined her, that its failure meant something fundamental was broken in her. But she understood now that the marriage hadn't failed because she was too ambitious or too absent. It had failed because Donovan couldn't be a partner to someone who shined as brightly as she did. And that was his loss, his limitation, not hers. The word meridian meant a circle of constant longitude, a line where different regions met. Donovan had chosen it because he'd thought it meant their lives intersected perfectly. But he'd been wrong about the definition, just as he'd been wrong about so much else. A meridian was also the highest point a celestial body reached in the sky. The peak, the pinnacle. Celestine had reached her meridian, but not through intersection with someone else. She'd reached it by rising on her own, by refusing to make herself smaller to accommodate someone else's insecurity. She got in her car and drove toward Everett's house, toward dinner and conversation and the gentle possibility of building something new. But she didn't need him or anyone to be complete. She'd learned the hardest way possible that the only person who could truly save her was herself, and she had. She'd saved herself, rebuilt herself, and become more than she'd ever imagined possible. The betrayal that had shattered her world had also freed her to build a better one. And for that, only that, she was grateful. Behind her, the hospital lights blazed against the darkening sky, a beacon of all the lives she'd saved and all the ones she would save tomorrow. Ahead of her, the road stretched out, full of promise and uncertainty and hope. Celestine smiled and drove forward, leaving the past behind and embracing the future she'd built with her own 2 hands. The same hands that had pieced her broken heart back together. The same hands that saved lives every day. The same hands that had learned, finally, how to hold both strength and softness at once. She was enough. She had always been enough. And that, in the end, was the only truth that mattered.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.